Welcome to Inspiring Insurance. Our goal is to provide value to the insurance industry through real-life experiences from insurance professionals who have walked the walk. You can expect to hear story sharing, top tips, and practical advice to help you grow and succeed in your career. We hope you enjoy this episode's guest. Welcome back to this week's episode of Inspiring Insurance. Today we have our first guest across the ditch. We're travelling over to Christchurch in New Zealand. Joining me today is Rose Wheeler. Hello, Rose.
Hi, Nathan.
Hello. Thank you for being this week's guest. Really excited to have you on board and learn about your story. So we've just had a little bit of a debrief. You've got a very, very interesting career to share with us. Starting in the construction industry with 20 plus years, you made a big pivot into insurance. Tell us all about
it. 2010, 6 weeks before the first earthquake. Was in a tutor group, I guess, onboarded with one of the large insurers to go into their commercial direct insurance team. What a journey. What a journey learning about insurance. So that's basically where it started for me. So I started in a call centre. They didn't allow us in the call centre for about 10 weeks. And then February arrived, 2011, and the earthquake happened and we were in the call centre. And what a pivot that was, speaking to people that just needed someone to talk to. So that's really where it started, organising generators to go into Christchurch with people that, with clients, because we just couldn't get insurance in those days to get trucks into the South Island. It was so difficult, but we made it work. Definitely made it work. And so from there, I sort of went from the call centre into the underwriting environment and worked for an underwriter for about 7 years. And then, of course, restructure happened in the insurer I was working for, and there wasn't a job for me. So it was like, where do I go now? So again, back with the recruiter in 2015, I started in broking. That was a learning curve, learning to switch off your underwriting hat and become client focused, and learning about how premiums are paid and how different the broking life is, I guess. And from there, I've really been a support, worked for several brokers. And then from there, the last broker that I worked for in the large company before I moved to Christchurch, she pushed me to become a broker with the clients that we had. She retired, so I got part of her book and went on from there. And then we came down here and I decided to have a year off with my husband, which I did. And then I found a small job with a small brokerage, working for a senior broker as his assistant. Same thing happened again for me. The branch manager resigned and they needed a broker or someone that had broking experience to split the book up. So I now find myself as an end-to-end broker heading for retirement, with a small book, working for this cool company based out of New Plymouth. And that's pretty much my story.
And so your first insurance role you started 6 weeks before the Christchurch earthquakes. How did you find coming into the industry when there was such a major event which the industry was impacted so heavily by?
I think for me, I guess construction, coming from the construction environment, was probably a bit of a blessing. I found myself 6 weeks in down here in Christchurch from Auckland with the claims teams, speaking with people that were devastated. Nobody can explain what it was like to be in environments where everything is topsy-turvy and people are just devastated because they've lost everything. Insurance-wise, because I was so new, I guess I didn't realise how much of an impact it actually had until I started looking after the rebuilds. So I was responsible for the contract works rebuilds that were going on with the claim settlements, and it was my job to administer, set up the contract works for the rebuilds of people that were moving into certain areas here in Christchurch. I don't think I realised how important insurance was until that point. And I think from there, that just that knowledge that you gain from dealing with people and learning to understand insurers at that time was just phenomenal. It's just huge. You can't even explain what that's like.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. And so that kind of light bulb moment that you had when you realized how important insurance really was, from someone who's not in the industry, what was that? What was that moment for you? What was that realization?
I think we don't think about the worst case scenarios enough.
Mhm.
I think as humans, we just don't. We think the insurance is there and it's going to cover us. But I think respectfully, we need to teach ourselves and have a knowledge of what even, like I'm in insurance, but at that point I hadn't been. And it was like, well, I'm paying all this money. I want to know what that pays for in the likelihood that my house falls down around me, or it's 10 foot deep in water. And I think really that is the most important thing that I can say to any of the clients that I have is,
Yeah.
do you actually understand what you're insured for?
Mm.
I think that was the most important thing. There was these devastated people, and I think even business owners, they had cover for their contents, but they had never thought about business interruption.
Sure.
They never realized how important business interruption was until that point.
Yeah, right. Do you have
Mm.
any success stories or anything like that, or any customers that you dealt with throughout that time that you were able to really, really help and make a difference for, given the situation?
I mean, it was so long ago.
Mm.
Um, I think it was the things that were coming. I think it was the businesses that were coming out of that environment. I remember insuring a young guy that had just literally been given this business by his father, who couldn't cope with it anymore. He
Mm.
needed insurance for all this mobile plant because he'd just been handed the contract to go and clear the red zones.
Mm.
And, like he had no idea of what he needed and what covers he needed. And I think he, just being able to guide him through the process at that time was phenomenal. He, like he went on to have a really successful business and then moved to Australia and carried on, took his skills there. But
Yeah.
I think it was those little things, those little wins with being able to help people, like I said, get generators into the environment when, we just couldn't get cover. So you were calling clients and saying, can you help with this? We've got a sick child that needs power. It's those small things. It's not necessarily one situation. They all sort of compounded on each other. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, wow. What do you love most about working in this industry?
There's a couple of things. I love speaking to people. I love speaking to the clients. But also too, and this might make people laugh because I'm much older coming into the environment, and it's still being able to write something down in pencil
Yep.
and use a calculator.
Yep.
And that sounds really strange, but it's still being able to take notes because we're completely paperless now, and we use spreadsheets and we type emails all day long, and we use online portals all day long, but there's still that element of being able to pick up the calculator and go, that doesn't look right,
Sure.
and use a calculator and write. And I think the other thing that's inspiring is that it's a curve, and things change so quickly that you're always learning.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm.
so important to always be learning on the job. And I guess in this industry, rules, regulations, policies, procedures changing all the time. So you've got to be really, really on top of it all. Hey?
I think I thought that would be a much harder curve to learn. Being, a lot older than my counterparts, I thought that would be much harder. But in actual fact, it probably isn't, because I think when you come from the environment that I came from, where it was probably one of the first industries to have a whole lot of compliance and a whole lot of regulation around safety in New Zealand, that, for me, it was like, oh, okay, so these are the things that we need to be compliant now. And, and these are the regulations. It also makes you very mindful to be aware of your facts.
Sure.
And conversations that you have with clients as well.
Sure. Yeah, wow. So you started in the industry, you went into the call center, you got trained on underwriting, then you decided to pivot into broking. What was the biggest challenge that you faced going from underwriting into the broking space?
Just how different it was. Just how different it was. It was, I think the focus going from, or like in the insurer, because I went from the call center into the underwriting space fully for the insurer. So I went into a brand.
Yeah.
And I guess you see how sometimes underwriting can be so complex to explain as a broker to a client, and it's that that sometimes could be very challenging. It was like, I think it's little things like, why have you put an excess on like that when they've never had a claim, and you're making them, and it's that type of thing. I think the other challenging thing that I'd never known anything about was there was this whole other world of how people pay for their insurance premiums, this whole world of funding, and it was like, oh, okay, that's new, didn't know that existed. And I guess it's that you don't know what you don't know. And there was a lot of that when you pivot from underwriting to broking. You don't actually realize how different it is.
Sure. It's very interesting because what I've found through recruiting from the industry is that we find a lot of brokers want to transition into underwriting. We don't tend to see it in the reverse like you have done. So what made you want to move into the broking side of things?
It wasn't a case of wanting to. It was a case of I needed a job.
Yeah.
And the underwriting manager that I had said, you're an amazing administrator. You'd be great as a support for a broker. And he put me in touch with a recruiter here in Auckland, and I went off to this interview. And I was interviewed by the then branch manager of the Auckland branch, the HR manager, and there was two brokers because they were recruiting for two brokers for a support. And it was a male broker and a female broker, and I was mainly challenged by the female broker, funny enough, who didn't think that I'd be able to turn off the underwriting hat and work quickly enough as a support.
Okay.
Which was really curious. There was that, and I was considerably older than her as a woman, but yes,
Sure.
she didn't. And then I went to work for this male broker, and he was amazing. What he taught me in the 2.5 years I worked for him was just incredible. It was that amazing curve of, oh, you have this knowledge, but I can teach you this. So yeah, I think taking skill sets that just blend into different roles, and then you find your niche.
For sure. And I guess that goes back to your construction background and then moving into insurance and having that knowledge for when you were dealing with the earthquake claims and everything like that. So yeah, it's all relevant.
It is relevant. I think I'll always have a passion for buildings and for construction, and for contract perils insurance. I think that will always. I love a good set of plans. Yeah, and it's not as complicated to get those types of covers now as it was back in the day. There's a lot more knowledge about building, and I think there's a lot more flow. So I think terms come back a lot easier these days.
Yep, amazing. And so fast forward to now. Where are we at now?
Where are we at now? Fast heading to retirement, actually.
Amazing.
So we moved to be closer to family. My daughter lives down here in Cromwell, and I came down here with the job that I had been with, the Auckland branch that I had been with. I worked on the North Shore, and I came down here, and my job at the time was split. So I was doing an end-to-end broking job, and I was also working in the test team for our software, and that again is a whole nother environment, learning about how the back end stuff works for companies, and how their systems work, and making sure the systems work properly. And that was very educational as well. So I came down, and that job finished, and I came to the point where I needed some time, because I had just, I hadn't taken any time off, and I was down here isolated, didn't know anybody. So I resigned, took a year off to get to know Christchurch, where we're living, and sort of spend some time with my husband, who's retired. And then it was sort of like, oh no, can't do this. I got to get a job. And so I walked into a very small broking company and started to work for a broker with a lot of experience. And then they've had massive changes. And for me, I've been able to create a job that suits me until I retire. I was able to negotiate in an SME with some domestic thrown in, and pretty much cater it to the way that I want it. So I'm end to end. I'm responsible for all of the clients, and they've catered that. I don't need any bells and whistles now. I'm coming to the end of career building. I'm happy to service the clients, give them the time that they need, and service their policies, and make sure that they're covered correctly. And it works. It really works for me, and it's really positive.
Amazing. You've mentioned a few times throughout this, so customer service, client service being really, really important to you. What does that look like for you, and what advice could you give to someone maybe newer in their career coming into the industry? Why is that so important, and how do you deliver on above and beyond service?
I think the most important thing is, don't be afraid of having conversations. You have to start somewhere. And do your homework, have a look and see, investigate, see what the client's up to if you can. So a lot of the clients that I'm dealing with are old school and still don't have an online presence. So you do have to go in there, and you do have to read. Majority now is starting to, but don't ever be afraid to engage them and say, you really need to be able to understand what they do to be able to insure them. And I think just start, write a list, and the important questions that you need to know, and start from there, because you'll always find that people, if you're engaging, people will talk to you, and they'll tell you everything, and then you'll go, oh, did you know you need to insure that? And then that's how the ripple effect happens. You then suddenly go, this client's had a business for 7 years and he has never insured it. He's insured one of them, but he hasn't insured the other one. Oh, hold on a second. It's those small things that I think the most important. Don't be afraid to engage people in a conversation. I think that's the most important thing that I can teach. And I think if you're young and you don't know how to do that, watch the brokers around you and talk to those brokers that you most gel with and that you most vibe with, and find out what their skills, what do you ask. I think that's the most important way of learning.
For sure, for sure. So if you had a new client, you wanted to, I guess, approach them around this, how would you strike up that conversation? What would your opener be?
Oh, it depends. It depends what they need. But I think mainly, I think you've given them a pre-warning. You've sent them a pre-renewal, or I had a renewal at the beginning of May for a client who's got 5 or 6 entities in his portfolio, and he'd always been looked after by our business owner.
Yeah.
And I'd called our business owner and said, "Are you happy for me to have these conversations?" And he said, "Yeah, if you have any trouble getting hold of him, you tell me." And so I sent him an email based on that with all of his entities all ready to go for renewal. How would you like to do the renewal meeting? Would you like to do a phone call, or would you like to do a video call? And of course, the email one-liner came back, "We'll phone, thanks." Because he's really old school. And so I let him, once I called him, I let him speak to me, because it's easier. He sort of instigated the conversation, and then you can go from there and do the discussions over what necessarily needs to happen within his, the renewal process at the time. And the only reason that we discovered that he had a business that he wasn't insuring was that he had a truck that he hadn't, that wasn't insured in the right place. It was insured, but it wasn't insured in the right place. And he said, "Well, maybe we should put that in the right place now." And I said, "Okay, you send me the details of what that should look like." And I said and he said, "Yep, okay, I'll do that." So we ended the call, and I got this email, and he sent me a list of the truck and its details. And then he sent me how much stock he would like and how much contents he would like. And he said, "It's insured here." And that was it. Just gave me an address. And you go, "Oh, gotta love it. What about everything else?" So it's that not understanding. The client didn't actually understand the information that I needed to be able to do that. So of course it's then that conversation again as to, "Thank you for that, but tell me about the building that everything's in, and tell me if it's got an alarm, and tell me about its fire protection." "Oh, okay, I'd forgotten about that stuff." And because clients get so busy, and a lot of the SME clients work in their business, they just don't have time to remember all of this stuff, and they forget about conversations because they're dealing very much in the now.
Yeah,
And yeah, so I think that's pretty much, I think that answers your question.
no, absolutely does. That was great. That was really, really good. So Rose, I don't know what the New Zealand market is like as such, with new talent coming to the industry. In Australia, we find there's a bit of a talent gap. You've got the retiring workforce, and then there's not a whole amount of education for new people joining the industry. What would your advice be to someone looking to get into the industry, or someone who might have just joined that's newer in their career? How can they set themselves up for a really, really successful career in insurance?
I think you're right. I think that I don't actually think there's enough knowledge at the high school end. And I don't even think that there's enough knowledge even in the tertiary environment. It's such a good career for young people, and they can, as you know yourself, earn very, very good money. I don't know how to tackle that, other than sometimes, there needs to be more of, in our industry, there needs to be more of an awareness that it is actually a very good career, and I wished I'd known about it when I was younger. And I don't have the answer for that. For anyone that's new in their career and they're starting, I think read every policy wording you can get your hand on. Have a knowledge and an understanding how policies work. And again, find that person in your working environment that you think can teach you or can help you learn, and ask them to mentor you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's something super respectful to
Yes.
brokers, even though that they are really busy. I think the one thing that I notice in the company that I work for now is there is a lot more of that. There's a lot more cohesiveness to, oh, can you check this for me? Or do you think I should reword this differently? I think that it's a little bit harsh. Am I covering everything? I think that peer review process of handshaking something and making sure that it's not that it's right, but that you're on the right track. I think that more than anything, I think is important. As far as how do we make the industry more attractive or get that out there, I don't know how we do that. Even here, there is such a lack of people, I think that in the industry, I think it's been so hard that the brokers that are coming close to retirement haven't either wanted to do level 5s, so they've gone, no, it's not for me. And the same with the supports. A broker that's got a massive book is only as good as the person that is doing the processing and getting them ready for the renewals. And again, I don't think there's enough encouragement as the job in the industry. And I don't know how, other than, getting people out there in front of employers or in front of, employment days for young ones. I think, I'm not sure how that's fixed to encourage people into the industry.
Sure. You did mention around having a mentor and being paired up with someone for that extra learning. And I think I'm pretty sure every single one of our guests on Inspiring Insurance so far has actually made a very, very similar comment around the importance of a really, really good mentor. What did you have a mentor when you were new to the industry or new to the broking space?
I don't know whether it was mentor, but the team leader I had at the time wasn't even knowledgeable. It was just the care of, we've got someone that can do the job that we need them to do. Now let's give them the skills to be able to fly. And I think I'd been in the role with the company that I was working for 2 months, and I was bored witless because the broker it was his book, and he didn't want to hand things over. So they decided to make me the branch credit controller. And it was like, oh, that was a learning curve. But hey, they didn't have any debt there for a while. And it was just, it was just something else that that you learned, and you understood the credit control process from that then. And, there was 30 brokers in that branch, so it was a huge job on top of, but it was the encouragement, I think, from the team leader actually saying, well, and if you didn't understand how something was working or how an insurance worked, because it was so new to me, marine cargo and marine was completely foreign, not done any of that. And so, there was that huge gap in my knowledge, but you soon learnt. And even having discussions with underwriters at the time, because you had to, was, it was great. And you learned about marine cargo and how complex it is.
Yeah, so just having that support person from the get-go to help motivate, train, learn, share ideas, so important.
I think and everywhere I've worked, I think, to be honest, I think there is that if you ask too. I don't think, don't ever be afraid of asking. If you don't know something, rather than break it, ask.
Yeah.
We used to, I used to see that a lot. People were afraid of asking if they didn't know something, and I've never ever been one to shy away from, I don't get it, explain it to me.
Sure. So important. Well, Rose, thank you so much for being a guest on Inspiring Insurance. I'm sure there's definitely a lot of key takeaways there that people will get a lot of value out of this episode. So I really appreciate you coming on board and sharing your story, and wish you all the best with, well, as you transition into retirement, as you said.
No, and I'm really looking forward. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm a very, very small fish in a very big pond, but happy to help and grow, someone else's amazing journey.
We really appreciate it. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.